Hey everyone, this is Tom Worth Jr., and today we're going to talk about Trump and the Confederacy, which is an odd combination because Trump is as New York, New Jersey as it gets, and Texas is not, and the entire South seems to be all in for Trump. And they would know better. If you presented Trump years ago as someone that would appeal to Southerners, especially to Texans, Texas is kind of an odd, not really the South, not really the West. I've always kind of thought of it as kind of its own thing, and it definitely is part of the South, and it definitely is Western, but it's also all Texas, and that goes back to its founding as its own republic. We had our own. They had their own war for independence against Mexico. That was won pretty quickly. But they were Americans who came over into Texas with the permission of the Mexican government, partially to settle the lands that the Comanche were assaulting all the time, going back to the Spaniards. Once the Comanche got horses that had escaped from the Spaniards or stolen from the Spaniards, they really took to them. The Comanches are a fascinating story unto themselves. There's a great book about them, Empire of the Summer Moon, I believe it was called. Just a fascinating read about that tribe and going back to even before the Spaniards got here a little bit. But anyway, that's another story. Texas won its independence, and they wanted to be part of the U.S. So they were, and the U.S. annexed them. Some years later, we won independence from Mexico in 1836. The U.S. annexed them some years later, very quickly followed by the Mexican-American War, in which Mexico lost all of Texas, all of California, New Mexico, Arizona, up into Colorado some. That was disastrous, but it wasn't like Mexico was looking to pick a fight with the U.S. They were just, manifest destiny, whatever you want to call it. The U.S. was going to go all the way to the Pacific, and nothing was really going to stand in their way. So when we win our independence from Mexico, it wasn't just because we wanted to be our own country. It was because we were Americans. We didn't want to be part of Mexico. We identified as Americans, and we had our own country. So when talk of secession came along, obviously Texas, big slave state, a lot of slavery in the economy, it wanted to secede. Sam Houston didn't. Hero of the Texas Revolution, really kind of won it for us. So this would be 25 years after the Texas Revolution is when the secession talks were held, and he voted against it. He was American through and through, and he said something to the effect that he would rather see Texas destroyed rather than do something to tear apart the Union. He did not want to secede. They had a vote. Not everybody, mostly people voted to secede and become part of the Confederate States of America, and they actually removed Sam Houston from office for voting against that. So Texas was all in on secession, all in on the Confederacy. When you talk to Southerners, my first experience with this was, I came from New York, but when I was 8 years old, and if you're wondering why I had the Michigan allegiance, that was because I was born in Detroit. Only lived there for a few years, but that was the first team I had any memory of rooting for. Like before I started really getting into college football, my junior high years. And then it was SMU back during the Pony Express days. And then I actually went to UT. So when I decided to do that, that's when I started becoming a Longhorn fan. But the Michigan Wolverines were my first allegiance. So you could say I was a Northerner through and through. Definitely being here in Texas, we were in a little suburb called Richardson, pretty new suburb, the first suburb to the north of Dallas. So there was a lot of transplants there. I didn't really see racism there or discrimination or whatever. My father did in his workplace. It's pretty openly, Dallas was pretty openly, still had a lot of racial discrimination. I guess it'll always go on to some extent, but back in the late 70s, it was still pretty rampant, I guess, but not where I grew up in Richardson, so I didn't really experience it. As a working person, I had a boss who was about my age, and he was a Texan. He went to Texas A&M. Didn't really like me from the start. I was kind of handed to him as an employee. I was a Longhorn. So I remember vividly going to a speech on the origins of the Civil War and obviously slavery, right? That was the origin of the Civil War. Well, this guy, who was a military history buff, he was an accountant, but he just, like myself, read history all the time, was very much, no, it wasn't slavery, it was states' rights. That's what the Civil War was fought over. And that is a fallacy. And it's a common one among Southerners, that this was about their rights being trampled upon by the North. If you go back and look at newspapers from the day and debates from the day, it was always about slavery. The whole founding of the United States had to wrestle with the issue of slavery. You had people like Thomas Jefferson with their soaring rhetoric, their mastery of the written word. They were so well read and studied. He had no way to make money. He owned human beings who had to work for him for free because they were his property. If he were to write in the freeing of the slaves, like he said, all men are created equal and blah, blah, blah. But if he took that to its practical, logical conclusion, obviously slavery wouldn't exist in the United States. But he's a flawed human being, just like all of us are. If you take away, if you have no money, you love to spend money, you have no way of making money, this is Thomas Jefferson, except for the human beings you own. Are you going to release those human beings and get nothing for them? And then what? And then have no way to pay your bills, have your big plantation confiscated, because you're not operating it as a profitable business if you include the costs of labor in that business. So he's not going to do that. George Washington's not going to do that. We can say, okay, we'll free these people after we die. That's what Washington did. And actually, after my wife dies, that's what Washington did, because we need to be taken care of economically. Always been a mess. Was not about states' rights. Okay. I went way too in the weeds on the Confederacy. Suffice to say that a lot of Southerners believe that the Civil War was about states' rights and individual rights and not so much about slavery. So the point of all of that was not to talk about states' rights and blah, 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 blah. It was to talk about this symbol, the American flag. USA, 1776. That when you drive around, at least here in Texas, and you see, sometimes you'll see people with a pickup truck with a big giant American flag. You've always saw that. You've always seen that. Now it is always accompanied by a giant Trump flag. And it's okay. I don't mind conceding the Confederate flag to Trumpers. I mean, that's fine. That's who they are. Some of them, a lot of them. But the American flag is all of America. I'm just a proud American, and I love my country. This is one of the reasons I get so worked up about what Trump is trying to do, because this is really kind of the only shot we have, is the United States of America. You can have democracies around the world, and we have many more now than we ever have. But the idea of America is it's only America. And if we lose that, Rome lost its republic to Caesar, and then it became the Roman Empire. From then on, it was never a republic again. Once you take something, this is something George Washington realized, even though they would have been happy for him to be a king, and our own King George. He saw that, no, we fought too hard to not have a king. And so he stepped down voluntarily. He didn't run again. And we saw Joe Biden do that. That is a difference between the Democrats not being the cult of personality that the party of Trump has become. They said to Joe Biden, look, we love you. You're awesome. You've given 50 years of public service to this country, but you can't win. So we also don't want to kick you out. Will you please step down? And it took them a while. Obviously, it's a big, probably since Washington has someone voluntarily step down. I guess you had LBJ not wanting to run again, but that's because I think Vietnam was such a disaster, and he just was fed up and didn't want any part of it. That was because he didn't want to be president anymore, more than doing something for the good of the country. At least that's what I believe. Could you imagine Trump voluntarily stepping down for the good of anything other than himself? No one can. Biden could, and he did. And that's kind of what America is the country is bigger than the president. And I just want our flag back. I want giant American flags to not be a symbol of Trump. And I want them to not be accompanied by Confederate flags. I want to just not be divided over things that shouldn't divide us anymore, like a COVID vaccination. My kids being in school. My daughter was in the spring of her second year at SMU here in Dallas. My son was in the first year out in Northern California. And you could not have had two more different handlings of COVID. In the face of all unknown, we had the president of SMU, who was this West Texas guy who had been at SMU for 30 years now. This is his 30th year there. He said, okay, we don't know what's going on here. It's spring break. It was in March. We'll take an extra week of spring break. We're going to figure something out. And then at the end of that, 2 weeks in March of 2020 said, okay, you don't have to come to class anymore. If you do, you need to wear a mask. I mean, nobody's actually going to class, and he didn't require the professors to be back at class yet. So kind of nobody went back, but they could have. The campus wasn't shut down. You just had life going on there. You were just doing classes remotely now for a little while, and then very quickly you could go back to class. Versus Stanford, they just sent everyone home a little before SMU had its epiphany, and said, you can't come back. You have to leave campus. I'm sorry. If, maybe you're an international student from Kenya or something. My son's random roommate was from there. They might have found some temporary arrangements for those people before they could get home, until they could get home. But campus was closed. You couldn't be there. And they kept it closed all summer because there's usually a summer session. They kept it closed the entire fall of 2020. And then going into January, when they're supposed to come back for winter break, for a winter semester or winter term, winter quarter, as they call it out there, they said, you know what, we're still not quite sure yet, even though you're supposed to be starting class in a week and you have your airfare to finally be out here for the first time since we sent you home in early March. We're going to need 2 or 3 more weeks. I forget what exactly it was. And we had my son and his girlfriend from out there here for the holidays. We had to rearrange their flights to now go back a little bit later. Fortunately, nobody was really flying anywhere at that time. I mean, cheap airfare everywhere, wherever you went. So then they finally opened up campus, and you finally got to go back to campus at Stanford in late January, I want to say. I mean, almost 10 months after SMU would let people back on campus, at least 9. So there is a middle. We don't want to be like that. We also don't want to be the SMU way, where let's just bring everyone back. But the politicizing of all of this, of a pandemic response, of whether you should wear a mask to protect yourself and everyone else from this invisible disease that was highly contagious and had no cure or no vaccine, how that became political because of Donald Trump making it political. He's always, this is straight out of the KGB playbook. This is sow division. This is, you can't defeat America from outside. You have to defeat them from within. I mean, my mind goes crazy with what's all really driving this, but I have to say Trump can't be this smart. He does have some smart people around him that are filling his head with all these plans and ideas, and he's just the useful idiot, as the early Bolsheviks would say, to carry out what you're told to do. Whether he's doing it on purpose, I don't think so. He can't think that way. He couldn't do something for another government or another country. He can only do things for himself. But if the Saudis or if Putin or if anyone else says, hey, you can build a hotel here, hey, we'll send you millions of dollars worth of business to your properties, will you do that? Hell yeah, he'll do that. He's always done that, and he's still doing that to this day. That's why he put his daughter in charge of the RNC, so they could take all the money people give to all Republican candidates to the party, and she can say, I'm sending it to dad's businesses. That's what they're doing. And still, they don't care. So anyway, that's the tie-in between Trump and Confederacy, Trump and Confederate flag. It's nothing to do with individual rights. It's just another an egregious symbol that he seized upon in his first term with his handling of a riot where innocent people got killed, and he said there's good people on both sides. It goes back to that. People can identify with that and say, yeah, he's our guy. So another example of he's our guy. Okay, let's end this on a hopeful note. I did see some polling from post DNC. It's too early to have the full effect yet, but everyone knew that Kamala would get a bounce, and that appears to really be happening. We all expect the bounce to be temporary. It's mid to late August right now. We've still got 2.5 months to go. Anything can happen, but I think people are excited in a way, obviously, that they were not about Biden, and hopefully that excitement can be sustained, and she can do great in her debate in a few weeks against Trump. I think her prosecutor experience will really help. In that arena, you just deal with liars all the time. You deal with crooks, criminals, liars. That's just your profession, is dealing with those people. So she'll just be able to swat them right down without having to worry about politics or being nice or or anything else. She'll just call it like it is, and I'm looking forward to that. So have a great weekend, y'all, and we will hopefully get this out today, maybe tomorrow, and we'll keep it rolling. All right, see ya.